So this is a video on examples of operations with negative fractions. So when we're doing operations with negative fractions, we have to remember operations with positive fractions, which we reviewed in a separate video, as well as our operations with integers, because operations with integers will help us determine which direction on the number line we are moving. So we look at the two numbers that we have, -1 3/4, and we're adding to it 2.5. So when you look at the signs of the two numbers, the signs are different. Well, if the signs are different, you're really subtracting. So I'm going to rewrite this problem as a subtraction problem. I'm going to put the larger number on top. Regardless of what the sign of that number is, I'm going to put the larger number on top and I'm going to subtract the smaller number because I'm going to take into consideration the sign of the number of the answer at the very, very end. So now I have a problem that should look quite familiar to me. I'm going to convert into common denominators. And then since I can't take 3 away from 2, I'm going to borrow. So when I borrow 1 whole, which is going to equal 4/4 in this case, because my denominator is fourths. I'm going to add 4 to 2, and I'm going to get 6/4. So I have 1 and 6/4, and I'm subtracting 1 and 3/4. So my final answer here is going to be 3/4. Now I'm going to look back at the sign of these two numbers. Since they were different, I knew that I had to subtract, but now I need to know the sign of my answer. So since the 2 1/2 is a larger number, my 3/4 is going to stay positive because 2 1/2, which is my original number, was positive. Now if I look on my number line, I decided to do my number line in quarters because I knew going into this that my common denominator would be quarters. So here I am, this is me, and I'm standing at, my legs are a little messed up. I'm standing at -1 3/4. I am moving myself 2 whole spaces and then half a space. So 1 whole space gets me to -3/4, and another whole jump gets me to 1/4. And then I'm going to go, okay, now I'm at 1/4 and I need to go 1/2. So 1/2 is really 2/4, 1, 2, and I end up at 3/4, which is what I got when I did my math. I know this is a bit confusing because number lines, when you're breaking them down, you're going to have to break them down into common denominators to work this out. But when I do my whole jumps, I am jumping 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have to do half of a jump, which is 1, 2, and that's how I get to 3/4. Again, you can just remember the rules of if the signs are different, you subtract, take the sign of the larger number. If the signs are the same, you add, and keep the sign. So in this problem, I'm going to notice that I have, I'm going to keep change opposite. And when I keep change opposite, the point in doing that is so I have an addition sign. And when I have an addition sign, now I can determine whether my signs are the same or my signs are different. In this case, my signs are the same, so I'm going to add. When I add, I don't have to worry about the signs. And the reason why I don't have to worry about the signs in this case is because I know that my answer is going to end up being negative. And I know my answer is going to end up being negative because both of my original fraction problems are negative. So again, I still need to make a common denominator. And when I find my common denominator, now I add my fractions. 2 and 7 is 9 and 9/10, and then 6 and 3 is 9. So I know since both of my original numbers were negative, my answer is going to be negative. I could draw the number line for you, but I want you to recognize that you're starting at -6 1/5. And when you were subtracting or adding a negative, so if you subtract or you add a negative, you go left on the number line. If you add a positive or subtract a negative, you go right on the number line. So when you're looking at this problem, you can say you started at -6 1/5 and you went smaller. So in this case, I'm going to keep change opposite. And when I keep change opposite here, it just becomes a standard problem. It's just an addition problem. I keep change opposite. I convert my fractions to common denominators. And in the end, my answer is positive, 7 and 5/6, then my answer is positive because both of my original fractions are positive. So here, when you're looking at these two problems, these two fractions, one is negative, one is positive. Since one is negative and one is positive, it's actually going to be a subtraction problem, which is the most confusing part for some people because they see this fabulous addition sign and they're like, oh, it's an addition problem. It's not an addition problem. It's actually a subtraction problem to find the answer. So again, I'm going to put the larger mixed number on top. I'm going to put the smaller mixed number on the bottom, and I'm going to subtract them. I'm going to do this because I want to find the difference between the two numbers. So here, I'm going to convert it to common denominator, which is tenths. And I'm subtracting. So 8 minus 5 is 3 tenths, and 3 minus 1 is 2. So I know my answer is going to be 2 and 3 tenths, but I also have to determine what sign it's going to be. So I look at the 3 and 4/5, it's got a negative, and the 1 and 1/2 is a positive, and 3 and 4/5 is a larger number, so my answer is going to be negative. And for the very last one, I'm going to keep change opposite. When I do that, my problem is actually negative 4.5 plus 3 and 1/4. So again, the signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. I'm going to put the larger fraction on top. Even if it wasn't the first fraction I saw, I'm still going to put it on top because it's going to end up being a subtraction problem, and it's going to get really difficult if the larger number is not on top. So I'm going to go ahead and convert them into common denominators. And I subtract and I get 1 and 1/4. I go back to the original problem and I say, okay, I have negative 4.5 and I have positive 3 and 1/4. So my answer is negative 1 and 1/4. Please remember that these are examples. This is not a real lesson because you've already learned operations with fractions and you've already learned operations with integers. So this is just marrying these two concepts. These are just a bunch of examples to help you out.